Well, Polygon is dead. The once prominent gaming website has officially been shuttered, its domain quietly sold off to a porn mogul, and its staff either laid off or absorbed into other Vox media outlets. Now, many of these writers going to the liberal echo chamber of Blue Sky to try to find new employment. That'll work. The site that launched with an 8-part documentary series about its own creation has ended with the sale to a porn company, and a legacy that leaves gamers divided. Can I just go back for a second? Polygon, right from the beginning, was so full of itself that it filmed an 8-part documentary about its creation.
Ta-da! Polygon.com.
Look at me. I'm so self-important. I haven't even published any works yet, but here, look at me. Their About page says very clearly what their mission was. Quote, "Our goal is to improve the worlds we cover. Whether that's having fun in fictional worlds, holding studios accountable in the real one, or introducing you to communities online and offline that we think you'll love." Your goal was to improve the worlds we cover? No. Your job was to cover video games. But this isn't just about one website. Polygon is a symbol. It represents everything that went wrong with modern gaming journalism. The arrogance, the cultural gatekeeping, the refusal to listen to an audience that clearly they didn't respect.
And that the games industry is diverse naturally. Not because anyone's making them be diverse, because the world is diverse, you stupid mother.
So today we're going to trace the full story from Polygon's glossy launch back in 2012 with its self-important 8-part documentary, to its pivot into moralizing identity politics, to the viral internet backlash that turned Polygon into a meme, to its financial collapse, and to its ultimate sale to a porn mogul. We're also going to look at Kotaku, its ideological twin in many ways, and how that site is on the same path towards irrelevance. How long do you give Kotaku until it's sold off or collapsed? Maybe a year? Maybe 6 months? Maybe you're generous, maybe 2 years. But more importantly, we're going to ask what happens when media companies forget who they're serving, because Polygon's story is just one symptom of a much deeper illness, and the patient is still bleeding out. When Polygon launched back in October of 2012, it wasn't some scrappy indie blog. It was an all-in, prestige digital media play backed by Vox Media, with significant funding, sleek branding, some of the biggest names in tech journalism and games journalism at the time, millions of dollars in funding. Vox's pitch was simple. Video games deserve to be treated like serious culture, like film, like literature. After all, video games are making more money than films. And they were going to build the newsroom to do exactly that, to lecture all of the industry about how they see the world. Polygon was assembled like an all-star team. It pulled talent from Joystick, from Kotaku, from The Verge, which was also in Vox Media. It featured a clean magazine-style layout. It's basically written for an iPad, if you want to think about it that way. The writing leaned heavily on long-form think pieces, developer interviews, and really laid heavy into design philosophy. You didn't just get a review score, you got a 2,000-word essay on what a game meant. And from a distance, that looked like some progress. Gamers were growing up. Games were more complex, more cinematic, more intertwined with technology, psychology, even politics. I mean, look at Metal Gear Solid, for instance. So Polygon positioned itself as the place where games would be analyzed seriously, where they could be cultural artifacts, not just products. In fact, Polygon made such a big deal out of its birth, it documented itself in this entire process. Yes, I can't let this go. I'm sorry. It was a high-production web series called Press Reset, the story of Polygon. And it wasn't just promotional fluff. It was practically a mini Netflix documentary series showing what their editorial vision would be, hiring process, the team culture.
We can look at a 10-year road and see what the web is going to be like in 10 years, and we can kind of plan for it.
They were transparent about their ambitions. They wanted to be like the New Yorker of games journalism. That should have been a red flag right from the beginning. The New Yorker, the magazine that has repeatedly pushed a political agenda, lied to its readers, fabricated quotes, caught in plagiarism scandals, failed reporting of the Mueller investigation. In fact, widely inaccurate reporting of the Mueller investigation. So they wanted to be just like the New Yorker? Okay, alarm bells. But early on, there were glimpses of greatness at Polygon. The site published strong investigative features on the harsh realities of game development, like on the now classic piece that they did on LA Noir's troubled studio Team Bondi out of Australia. They covered indie developers with seriousness, giving visibility to creators who didn't have PR teams, right? A lot of indie developers, they certainly don't have the marketing reach. They spotlighted mental health, unionization, the darker sides of the industry success. So Polygon was polished, confident. They were like proud to be something different. But something began to shift. Something big happened. Instead of exploring what games meant to different players, Polygon increasingly began telling readers what games should mean. And if you disagreed, well, maybe you were the problem. You were toxic. You are the problem. Gamers are the problem. And that's the very moment that they lost. The site's early mission was serious games coverage. It turned into something more rigid, more judgmental. It stopped being about loving games. It became about correcting games. We're going to tell these studios how to make their game. We're going to push our out-of-touch political ideology on these studios and our readers. And that's where things went wrong.
That's why we recruited her.
Actually, Tosh uses them for themselves now.
By 2014, just 2 years after launching, Polygon began drifting away from its original mission of exploring games through a serious, thoughtful lens. Instead, it started to adopt a very specific ideological tone, one rooted in social justice language, cultural moralizing, and what critics began calling identity-first journalism. So let's be clear. Including diverse voices in media is not a problem. That's why Blue Sky will fail, because it only highlights liberal voices in an echo chamber. Diverse voices are great, but that's why Mastodon failed. That's why Threads failed. That's why Blue Sky will fail too, because echo chambers don't work.
I just didn't know they could make a woman look so much like a man.
Not a woman who looks like a man, Sam. A man. A real man, just like you.
Highlighting underrepresented communities in gaming is not a problem. The issue was that Polygon started to center every story, every review, every editorial choice around progressive identity politics, even when it had nothing to do with the game itself. Over time, of course, the publication went from being about games to being about what games say about you as a person. And if those games didn't say the right things, Polygon had a problem with them. And by extension, they had a problem with you. So let's walk through just a couple of examples here, a couple of concrete examples that demonstrate how out of touch and how extreme this editorial shift became. So Polygon gave Bayonetta 2 a lower score, not because of gameplay or bugs, but because they objected to the protagonist's sexuality. Reviewer Arthur Geist deducted points due to the over-the-top sexualization of the character. Despite being one of the most well-designed action games of the decade, the review was laser-focused on whether Bayonetta was a good role model. She looks too much like a real woman, so we can't have that. Look at the title of the article, Bayonetta 2 Review, Heaven and Hell. It left me asking how many different ways Platinum could find to run a camera between Bayonetta's legs. I do find it funny and pretty ironic that Polygon was sold to a porn mogul. Here's another example, Doom. Instead of focusing on the fluid combat and tight controls, Polygon criticized the game for being a power fantasy rooted in toxic masculinity. They claimed the soundtrack and gore glorified violence, and that enjoying it without guilt was morally questionable. So I should play this game and I should feel guilty. Like that's what they want me to do. Okay. One of my favorites is when Polygon ran an opinion piece suggesting that Pokemon perpetuates colonialist tropes because players collect and control creatures, and sometimes they do it on an island. The author connected Pokeballs to imperialism and accused Game Freak of never reckoning with its legacy of simulated conquest. They spent paragraphs talking about colonialism in Pokemon. By the way, if you want a deeper dive on colonialism, highly recommend the great book called Lies My Liberal Teachers Told Me. Great chapter on colonialism if you want your eyes opened. Then there's Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild in 2017. The review included frustration that Link wasn't a woman. One opinion piece asked, why not let Zelda be the hero? Implying that failing to gender swap the lead character was a missed opportunity to dismantle patriarchal gaming norms. What about Animal Crossing? This was one of my favorites. They were accused of microaggressions. A staffer wrote a piece lamenting the lack of inclusive black hairstyles in the game in Animal Crossing, in New Horizons, calling it a missed opportunity to reflect the real world. They referred to hairstyle limitations as microaggressions. Another example is Overwatch and Tracer's sexuality. Back in 2016, Polygon praised Blizzard's reveal that Tracer was a lesbian, not because it was well integrated into the game in any kind of way, but because it just checked a representation box. No mention was made of why the reveal happened outside the game in a comic book with no in-game narrative payoff. Doesn't matter. Kingdom Come Deliverance, slammed for its historical accuracy. Game was set in medieval Bohemia, but Polygon criticized it for featuring only white characters. When the developers cited historical research, they were still accused of erasing minorities, even though that demographic didn't exist in the region at that time. Okay. And Polygon famously published an opinion piece declaring that every game is political, and if developers say otherwise, they're cowards. The idea of neutrality was attacked as dishonest and politically dangerous. And then they came back to attack Animal Crossing again in another hit piece. This one claimed that the game didn't provide enough skin tone variation and reinforced white beauty standards. Over time, this kind of content wasn't just common on Polygon, it became the norm. Almost every article had something to do with, identity politics. Over time, this kind of content wasn't just common on Polygon, it became the norm. I mean, almost every article had some mention of LGBTQ, lesbian, this agenda, that agenda, all of it. Polygon began applying a kind of ideological litmus test to every game that came out. If a title wasn't overtly inclusive or progressive enough, it was subtly shamed. If it dared to present violence without moral commentary, then it was toxic. And you should probably feel guilty about enjoying it, right? If it didn't include diverse characters and prominent roles, then it was problematic. You don't have a person of color in a lead role, then you're the problem. This tone alienated the very audience that Polygon was built to serve. Gamers came for coverage of their favorite games. Instead, they got lectures about race, gender, systemic oppression, all applied clumsily to games about jumping mushrooms and space marines. The result? Guess what? Readers started leaving in droves. The YouTube comments and Reddit threads didn't just disagree, they mocked Polygon. Memes flourished, and the reputation of Polygon, the game site, quickly became Polygon, the echo chamber. It's sort of appropriate that most of these writers are now in another echo chamber over on Blue Sky. Will they ever learn? Probably not. The shift was complete. Polygon was no longer about games, it was about ideology, pushing an agenda on us. If there's one thing I hate, it's to be lectured by pseudo-intellectuals who live in Brooklyn. Readers began sharing clips and headlines that reinforced the idea that Polygon's writers either didn't play games or were actively hostile to what gamers actually enjoyed. Popular YouTubers like Legacy Killa HD, Upper Echelon, The Quartering, they created entire videos dissecting Polygon's editorial failures. Some of these racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Even more moderate voices like Jake Baldino over at GameRanks began distancing themselves from games media broadly, thanks in part to Polygon's reputation basically poisoning the well. By the way, I have to say I really like Jake Baldino. I like him a whole lot. I think he does a great job. He's honest, and he doesn't push you in any kind of way. Gives you his opinions of a game, whether he liked it, whether he enjoyed it, whether he thought it was heavy-handed, and he lets you make your own decisions. I appreciate that.
If you feel like you're losing your love and your passion for gaming, keep looking, keep searching, or go back and play a game from a couple of years ago that you missed, or even go back and play a game from a previous generation.
Reddit threads were relentless. Twitter mockery was constant. Even game developers, many of whom privately agree with some of Polygon's critiques, began quietly avoiding the site altogether, trying to stay away. One indie dev was quoted anonymously in a 2021 game developer article saying, "If Polygon reaches out, I have to consider whether the interview will be about my game or about my politics." Ouch. So it's best just to ignore Polygon when they reach out. It's not worth it. Why would I want to talk to these bozos? So they can lecture me about my game? F off. Gamers who asked for honest, apolitical reviews were often painted as reactionary or toxic. You're toxic. You're part of Gamergate or something they'll throw at you. You're toxic. But they kept leaving anyway. They didn't want to be insulted. They wanted to know if a game was worth their money. Should I buy Monster Hunter Wilds or not? Or are you going to lecture me about why Gemma is a good-looking female Smithy and why, she should probably look more like a butch lesbian working those bellows? Shut up. Enough already. Is the game good or not? But Polygon wasn't just losing credibility. It was losing relevance altogether. And that irrelevance had a price. Behind the scenes, the business model was falling apart. Like most digital media outlets, Polygon was built on a fragile foundation. Page views, more clicks equals more ads, more revenue. But by 2019, that model was crumbling, and here's why. Facebook changed its algorithm, slashing traffic referrals overnight. YouTube became the default place for gaming content, thanks to gameplay videos, long-form reviews, live reactions from real creators. Google prioritized affiliate link farms like IGN and GameSpot in search results. Ad blockers skyrocketed, killing CPM-based revenue. And Polygon's writing became increasingly political and off-putting. No one wants to read that crap. And then Polygon tried to pivot. They slashed editorial budgets. They leaned into SEO clickbait. As an example, like the top 25 RPGs of all time. It would do that every month. They added affiliate links to gear and games deals. They began pushing quizzes and newsletters, again, trying to force more clicks with garbage content. But it didn't work. Readers weren't clicking. The audience didn't trust the reviews. The long-form features were dying off. Those old investigative pieces they did, gone. The newer writers were inexperienced, barely paid, and the traffic was drying up. And by 2023, traffic had dropped below 8 million monthly visitors, a far cry from its 2015 peak of over 30 million. And then in recent months, readership plummeted even more, flatlining. While at the same time, I find this hilarious, Vox Media raised $100 million in funding. So something wasn't adding up. Then came the axe. The collapse was official. They had already cut staff at The Verge, SB Nation, and Curbed. Vox's podcast empire wasn't performing anymore. Ad revenues were down. Big venture funding was drying up in the post-pandemic world. And then Vox dropped the hammer, selling Polygon to Valnet, which is owned by Hassan Youssef, the porn king. He's known as the online porn pioneer. If you've never heard of Valnet, then here's what you need to know. They are a Canadian media conglomerate that specializes in buying struggling websites, converting them basically into garbage content farms like Screen Rant or Game Rant, sites that are notorious for flooding Google with low-effort listicles, minimizing staff pay, using freelance writers working for pennies, replacing journalism with SEO-optimized fluff, probably AI articles. Now, Polygon was next in line. And after the Valnet sale, Polygon staff took to the liberal echo chamber of Blue Sky, begging people to hire them. Hey, people stopped reading Polygon because of our writing. Why don't you hire me? Oh yeah, let me hire you ASAP. Your articles are literally responsible for why the website tanked, because you pushed identity politics and lectured your audience. Yeah, let me hire you. Can you do for my website what you did for Polygon? Drive it into the ground by pushing your identity politics on readers? This wasn't just a fall, it was a nosedive. But guess what? Polygon is not alone, because Kotaku is next. You might even call it a twin story of decline. If Polygon was a casualty of arrogance, Kotaku was a casualty of entropy. Where Polygon was built with prestige and collapsed into irrelevance, Kotaku really was once a scrappy, beloved outsider, and then slowly disintegrated from the inside out. 17 years ago, when I was a young tech reporter, covering games and game companies, I had a lot of friends at Kotaku. They would come on my show. I saw them all the time at events. They were scrappy. They were kind of edgy. They were kind of outsiders. And I really appreciated them. I mean, for many gamers, Kotaku used to be the destination for kind of bold commentary, maybe some early scoops, a lot of sharp editorial voices. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, when I was really friends with a lot of those guys, the site was fearless. I had a lot of respect for them. They weren't afraid to criticize publishers. They covered crunch culture before it was mainstream. But after Gawker Media collapsed in 2016, thanks to Peter Thiel's lawsuit and the Hulk Hogan trial, Kotaku was sold off to Univision and then later absorbed into Geo Media. From there, it entered its long, slow death spiral. And then their biggest writers left. Jason Schreier joined Bloomberg. Cecilia D'Anastasio went to Wired. Another BS woke magazine, Wired. Remember that? That used to be a good magazine 15 years ago. Now it's garbage. Patricia Hernandez left, came back, then left again. Turnover became constant. New writers were underpaid, overworked as usual. Kotaku, like Polygon, began leading with social critique. Headlines became indistinguishable from Tumblr posts. Reviews often included long sections on gender politics, capitalism, problematic characters, even when the games had nothing to do with any of that. Didn't matter. One example, in their Cyberpunk 2077 coverage, Kotaku focused more on trans representation and crunch culture than on whether the game actually worked. It didn't. It was a mess. They published hot takes mid-launch, then had to walk them back. Beyond their identity politics, Kotaku's website has become virtually unreadable. And I think even more than their politics, this is the stuff that drives me nuts. This is why I'll never read a Kotaku article again in my life. Pop-up newsletter prompts block the entire screen. Autoplay videos run over texts constantly. Comment sections were either nuked or locked. Mobile formatting has been broken, so try to read Kotaku on a mobile device. It's garbage. One Redditor summarized it perfectly. I love this. Quote, I used to check Kotaku every day. Now I can't even load the page without my phone crashing. It kind of sums it up. You ever try to look at one of their slideshow articles? It's awful. It's the worst. I mean, no wonder their bounce rate numbers are off the charts. People land on their clickbait articles. They bounce right off the site because it's such a painful experience. They kind of throw all these ads at you. And they really started escalating their clickbait titles. They weren't just opinions. They were designed to provoke, insult, and even bait hate clicks. Hey, a click's a click, right? Even if they hate us. Let's insult gamers. Let's say how gamers are the worst. Let's write an article about how gamers are the worst. Let's clickbait them. The gamers simply tuned out. They were done with it. Turns out when you insult gamers over and over again, they're going to stop reading your website. Traffic declined. Writers burned out. Kotaku's relationship with its audience totally collapsed. Just go to Reddit right now. I mean, I'm no fan of Reddit, but just go there and look at how many people just say they've lost all credibility. Geo Media, desperate to cut costs, began gutting their other brands as well. Jezebel was shut down in 2023. Deadspin, gone, became a zombie website. The Onion, remember that thing used to be funny 15 years ago. They've laid off its entire core team. It's garbage. No one reads that anymore. Kotaku, as of 2025, is still limping along, but for how much longer? I mean, how many more months do you give it? Its YouTube channel is inactive. I just checked. Their last video was published 7 months ago. So what that tells me is you've given up. Your YouTube page hasn't been updated in 7 months. Its Twitter X engagement is pitiful. No one's reading it. And of course, you're not going to grow your audience beyond your echo chamber if you're posting on Blue Sky. And its writers often use personal Substacks as their real voice because the Kotaku brand no longer carries any weight. Today, Kotaku feels like a ghost ship. The logo is still there. The RSS feed still updates with BS articles, but the soul is totally gone. And real gamers, they've long since moved on. They don't read that site at all. While legacy sites like Polygon and Kotaku imploded, the gaming audience didn't disappear. They migrated. They went where they felt respected, where people actually played the games, where reviews weren't morality tests. They turned to creators, and YouTube and Twitch have replaced the website homepage. Creators like SkillUp, whose brutally honest, high production reviews routinely pull in like 500,000 plus views.
I do not have a monopoly on truth. As I've said many times before, I'm just a nerd with a microphone and a YouTube account. My opinion is no more or less valuable than anybody else's.
Asmongold, who doesn't give a shit what you think about him and just tells it like it is. With new game releases, gives you his honest opinion. You can take it or pound sand. It doesn't really matter.
I mean, every single option makes me transgender. There's no option not to be transgender. It says makes me trans. This one does, and this one. I don't know why I have to be trans, guys. I can't. I don't know what to do.
Legendary Drops, someone who really burst on the scene over the last year with his brutally honest take on games and gaming culture. Legacy Killer HD, I mentioned a long time ago, who covered news with more nuance and reach than most journalists do. Mortismal Gaming. You want a deep dive review of a game after 100%ing the game? You know he's actually playing it because you can see his Steam profile is public. Jake Baldino, I mentioned him. Gamer Ranks, who keeps it casual, friendly, and fun without ever sounding preachy. That's the same with Johnny over at the Happy Console Gamer, channel I love. Gives us honest takes on games, stuff he loves to play. He really doesn't play games he doesn't want to play and won't enjoy. Upper Echelon or Mr. Matty Plays. I mean, Matty, for instance, I really appreciated his review of Veilguard. He didn't pull any punches at all. I mean, you should watch that review. He goes deep into the dialogue and how painful it is. They're pushing this agenda, these characters. So I really appreciate these honest reviews from people. You can see right through the phony ones, can't you?
I feel bad that I don't like it. I've never experienced that before, but I wish so badly. I love this game.
These creators didn't need SEO or clickbait, and they're trying to force like listicles down your throat and ridiculous slideshows. They have a community. Most importantly, they have our trust. Suddenly, long-form journalism, the thing Polygon claimed to champion, was thriving outside the newsroom. I mean, this video you're watching right now is probably going to be over 20 minutes long. I mean, I don't need Kotaku for this to reach an audience. And podcasts have become the new roundtable discussions. And honestly, a lot of these roundtable shows, those sound a little too much like Kotaku, like they're unwilling to take a stand. So you ever watch these roundtable podcasts? They talk about a lot of big issues. They talk around them, though. So I think there's still space for a really good roundtable show that's not afraid to tackle tough subjects in gaming. But there are some good ones out there. But again, I think we need a better one. So the conversation didn't die. It just moved. It moved away from these websites. And the biggest key shift was around relationship. Polygon and Kotaku saw their audience as flawed, as toxic, in need of correction. They often wrote against their own readers. YouTubers and podcasters did the opposite. They treated their audience like peers, like you're part of a community. They said, here's what I liked. Here's what didn't work for me. You might feel differently, and that's okay. What's your thought on this game?
Hopefully others like it more than me. That's how I'll close it out. I hope more people like it than me. I hope that I'm just a cranky old dude.
That tone, that respect made all the difference. Today, a single Asmongold review can shape public opinion more than anything that IGN or Polygon or Kotaku publishes. Legendary Drops did a review a few weeks ago about Lords of the Fallen with their 2.0 release. And yeah, it was a sponsored video, but he did it honestly. And his take actually brought me back to try the game again. I got to tell you, I really didn't gel with the game when it first came out. I thought it was okay. I liked some of the mechanics, some of it was interesting, but I fell off pretty quickly. And he sold me on just giving it another shot because he didn't talk down to me. He just highlighted how the developers doubled down on fixing this game. They took all of this feedback from players that said it was horseshit, and they fixed it. Sort of like No Man's Sky, fixing something I already paid for. I appreciated that take. So again, his one video brought me back to trying Lords of the Fallen again. And the future of games media isn't a slick website with 15 editors. It's a passionate creator with a camera and a Discord server.
Like, honestly, I feel like this is probably, of all the games, probably one of the greatest games I've ever played in my whole life.
So what killed Polygon? It wasn't just the industry. It wasn't just the changing traffic, algorithms, or YouTube, or SEO, or AI. Yeah, those things didn't help, sure. But the core collapse of Polygon was arrogance. Arrogance is what kills everything. Polygon believed it was above its audience. It started with good intentions to elevate gaming discourse, to treat the medium with the seriousness that it deserves. But somewhere along the way, it became about control, not curiosity, about shaming people, not sharing. Games were no longer reviewed based on gameplay or design. They were judged on whether they passed a cultural litmus test, whether they were inclusive enough, progressive enough, political enough. Polygon totally lost the plot. It forgot that gamers are supposed to be fun, that they are art, but also entertainment, that they can explore deep social themes without being lectures, that players are not villains just wanting to slay dragons or save the princess. And worse, it forgot its readers. It treated them not as partners in the conversation, but as a problem to fix. And the readers noticed, and they left. They went to YouTubers who actually played the games, to the podcasts that had fun, to newsletters that respected them, to creators who weren't trying to win Twitter points or virtue signal. Just people who loved games and wanted to talk about games. That's the real story here. Polygon didn't just die because of money, it died because it betrayed its audience. And Kotaku? They're next. They've been circling the drain for years. Now, Geo Media has gutted their budget, slashed their staff, buried their reputation in clickbait and ideological purging. They'll either be quietly shut down or absorbed into another generic ad farm. Maybe the porn king will buy them too. Either way, the soul is gone. The readers have left. The writers are writing elsewhere or just posting on Blue Sky, which no one reads either. Kotaku and Polygon thought they were the arbiters of gaming morality, but they ended up irrelevant because they refused to listen. So there's a lesson for the rest of us here. Serve your audience or don't be surprised when they leave. Respect your readers. Or guess what? They're going to find someone else who does. Cover games like they matter, but don't forget why they matter. Not because they tick off the right identity boxes, but because they inspire, they entertain, they connect people, they spark joy. Games are not a problem. Your arrogance is the problem. And for many of us, games are just escapism we don't want to be lectured to while enjoying this hobby. Polygon was launched with fireworks, millions of dollars in funding, and a promise to change gaming journalism forever. And it did, but not in the way that it hoped. It showed the world that what happens when a media outlet loses touch with the very people it was meant to serve. It became a cautionary tale, a punchline, a relic. So guys, pour one out for Polygon. Tip your 40 for Polygon, the site that wanted to save gaming, but ended up being saved from gaming. Thank God they are gone. So guys, if you like this video, and I'm sorry that I'm still suffering from the flu, so my voice is nearly gone, but thank you guys for being here. Please subscribe, share the video if you liked it, and we'll see you next time.